ดสอบหนึ่งสองเช็คเช็คทดสอบหนึ่งสองทดสอบทดสอบหนึ่งสองฮัลโหล audio check 1 2ครับ
ลำโพงนี้เสียงมันจะออกเท่ากัน
เราไปหาพวกมึงงั้นต้องฝังดีกว่า
ฮัลโหลมีเพจนะคะมันตรงลำโพงแค่ค่ะเดี๋ยวเขาดูไม่ใช่ไม่ใช่ค่ะไม่ใช่ค่ะลำโพงก็อยู่ตรงนี้ค่ะที่มี press package
这是一样。
from the other side.
But more like a touristy place.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she's coming. I just wonder, do you need a bit more time?
No?
Yeah.
I think just to...
Okay.
ไอ้สีนี่ก็ทำแบบว่าทำไปได้
Ladies and gentlemen, we will start the event shortly. If you could kindly sit down and turn your phones onto silent mode.
This way and the second row.
whenever you like. Huh?
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the United Nations system, a warm welcome to the Asia-Pacific Commemoration of International Women's Day 2016. Planet 50-50 by 2030, step it up for gender equality. This event will be conducted in English and simultaneously interpreted into Thai. Headsets are provided on your seats. Please choose channel 1 for English and channel 2 for Thai. ภาษาไทยที่ใช้สำหรับงานประชุมนี้เป็นภาษาอังกฤษซึ่งเครื่องแปลภาษาได้ถูกวางไว้บนเก้าอี้ของท่านหากท่านต้องการรับฟังงานประชุมเป็นภาษาอังกฤษให้เลือกช่องที่1และภาษาไทยช่องที่2ครับ To begin, we will have a screening of a video Planet 50-50 by 2030. Step it up for gender equality, which highlights commitments of Asia-Pacific leaders to gender equality and women's empowerment. It is now my pleasure to invite Ms. Shamshad Akhtar, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, to deliver the keynote address.
Excellencies, distinguished representatives, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Asia-Pacific Commemoration of International Women's Day. It's great to have you all here representing so overwhelmingly and also recognizing the significance of this day. This morning, as I was coming out here, I was looking at the Secretary General's message, and I would very much encourage you to look at his message. United Nations can be proud of itself. United Nations, under the leadership of Secretary General, has been able to achieve a fair degree of progress internally within United Nations to enhance representation of senior leadership in UN. It's pretty overwhelming, the progress that has been made, and I personally also owe thanks to the Secretary General for his leadership. Every year in our compact, we have to commit ourselves to meet the targets of gender parity. As of December 2015, we have surpassed our 50-50 gender balance goal in ESCAP in locally recruited position, with 65% females and 35% males. We are approaching gender equality in the P2 and P3 levels, with averages of 44% females versus 56% male. Our ratios are somewhat lower for P4 and P5 levels, but I can tell you that I am striving pretty hard to raise these. Compared to a year ago, the largest improvement was made at the senior D1 level, where there was an increase of 15%. We have 53% females as of 31st December 2015, compared to 38% females as at 31st December 2014. The reason why I'm recounting these numbers is that the first task we have at hand is to make sure we do our job to ensure that at least in our own limited domain and horizon, we are able to show some results to the rest of the world. Asia Pacific is a very large region, and ESCAP's affiliation with Asia Pacific has been remarkable on all fronts. And this has been an overwhelming area for us. And I thank all our directors to make it possible to achieve better ratios. I have to report that today in our transport division, in our macroeconomic policy division, we have started to induct women, relative to 0 women in those 2 divisions. So it is very enlightening to me that with strong determination, political leadership that you saw, and strategic thinking, outreach, we can achieve the desired results. So at this moment, all I can say, let's celebrate the progress we have made in advancing gender equality, but more importantly, it is time for action to close the critical gender gaps that remain. Since 2006, another 250 million women have entered the global labor force. And a recent McKinsey study has found that by advancing women's equality, up to 12 trillion could be added to global GDP by 2025. So even with this information, I'm perplexed why the average annual pay for women today equals the average that men were earning 10 years ago. Why can't we get this right? Women across Asia and Pacific today earn on an average 20% less than men. While our region has closed more than 2/3 of its gender gap, it still ranks second from the bottom in women's economic participation and opportunity, political empowerment, education, health, and survival. I'm a person who believes in numbers, and the numbers do show mixed results. And in some areas, they are not very impressive. In Asia and the Pacific, gender gaps in economic participation have barely changed for more than 20 years, with the gap at nearly 50% in the South Asia sub-region. Although the countries of Asia and the Pacific, compared with other regions, have shown the greatest improvement in women's political empowerment over the past decade, average female representation in Asian national parliaments is still only 19%, significantly lower than the global average of 23%. In the Pacific, the rate is lower, still just 13%. And I don't think there is any female leader of the small island developing states that ESCAP is a member, that are affiliated with ESCAP. Gender-based violence remains a reality across all subregions. Between 25 and 70% of women and girls facing violence at the hands of an intimate partner. This has severe consequences, not only for women and their families, but also carries economic and social cost. These entrenched inequalities are a matter of concern for two main reasons. They undermine women's fundamental rights and they hold back sustainable development and the achievement of prosperity and well-being for all. This is why a specific sustainable development goal has been dedicated to gender equality and women's empowerment in the new 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And this will also be a key element of our deliberations at the 2016 Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development from 3rd to the 5th of April. How do we move forward to achieve this? I'm sure you all are struggling with this question. To break through barriers, we must go beyond boundaries, generate new ideas, be aggressive, take bold actions and steps. I would like to focus today on two key enablers: finance and technology for gender equality and women's empowerment. First, a word on the resources themselves. Increasing the resources and strengthening of governance of gender equality and women's empowerment has to be the integral element where we try to work very hard for the implementation of the SDGs. A 2014 survey of Asia-Pacific governments revealed that across 17 countries, annual funding in support of gender equality and women's empowerment ranged from just 0.003%. Imagine what this is, 0.003% to 3% of national budgets, the highest achievement. For 15 of these 17 countries, the national budget allocation to gender was less than 1%. Women are 50% or so of the population. This is clearly insufficient if we are to achieve the SDG targets. Lots of innovations are going on. Yesterday we were holding an STI advisory board meeting, and there was a very impressive lady from Bangladesh who talked about social innovation, where impact funds, investments are being used to promote the cause of the women. But these are really isolated examples. They are good, but are they going to achieve scale? No, we need scalability in this area. So this is why gender concerns are now being integrated in ESCAP's policy advocacy on public financial resource management, which means, of course, we will work on domestic resource mobilization through the window of tax reform. But we have to start participating in where the money is being invested, both in the public and private sector. To the extent it's public sector, it's called public financial resource management. So I think UN system that's represented here will be working with us quite closely in implementing the SDGs, and this is one of the areas that we'd like to work unitedly as one UN. Last April, ESCAP, together with Government of Indonesia, convened the first Asia-Pacific high-level consultation on financing for development. One of the priorities identified was ensuring that new financing for development framework contributes to one of the priorities identified was ensuring that the new financing for development framework contributes to higher living standards, creates decent jobs, and empowers women and girls in our region. It is also recommended mainstreaming gender consideration into national budgetary processes. These deliberations will be continued at the end of this month in the Republic of Korea, when ESCAP hosts the third Asia-Pacific consultation on financing for development, with a focus on tax reform, strengthening regional capital markets, infrastructure financing, as well as financial inclusion that has to exclusively service women, if I had my way. But we must look beyond government resources alone to other financing mechanisms. I'm pleased to note that leading financial institutions, and one of the examples that I quoted earlier, are increasingly engaged in social impact investing, contributing to greater gender equality. Lack of access to financial services and productive assets makes it difficult for women to start businesses or invest in education, further entrenching the cycle of inequality. Around the world, the gender gap in financial inclusion is not significantly narrowing, with only 58% of women compared to 65% of men owning bank accounts. In South Asia, the situation is somewhat dismal. Only 1 in 3 women have a bank account. The SDG Financial Services Industry Matrix, produced by the United Nations Global Compact and KPMG, offers a number of good examples of how private sector partners are increasingly leading in women's empowerment and enhancing financial inclusion. Harnessing information, communications, and technology is also vital for women's empowerment to enhance access to markets and services. Yet across 11 low and middle income countries in our region, women are 14% less likely to own a mobile phone than men, a gap which increases to 38% in South Asia. In East Asia and Pacific, 54% of women remain unconnected. In this regard, I'm pleased to inform you that ESCAP will soon launch a new regional program, our Women and ICT Frontier Initiative, to support women's access to technology and to build their skills to start and expand their businesses. I owe special thanks to one of our regional institutes in Incheon to make this possible. Let me take a few minutes to talk about gender equality and the SDGs. For the 2030 Agenda to succeed, we must root out the causes of inequality between women and men. This means addressing unequal gender relations and power imbalances. It means tackling structural barriers such as discriminatory legislation and macroeconomic policies, prejudicial social norms, and harmful practices. This means placing all women and girls at the center of the 2030 Agenda, but requires a specific focus on those who are most frequently excluded, including women and girls with disabilities, those living in rural poverty, those who are members of ethnic minorities. It was heartening that at this SDG summit in September last year, 19 heads of state from the Asia-Pacific region pledged to take bold measures to step it up for gender equality, which is the theme of our event here today. Stepping it up means focusing on women and girls in education, economic empowerment, political participation, and addressing violence against women. International Women's Day should be marked by a pledge of parity to ramp up the ambition of our vision and accelerate the urgency of our actions on gender equality and women's empowerment. ESCAP stands ready to partner with you to these ends. The future we want demands this of us, and I thank you all for being here to celebrate this particular day, but hope that the messages that we have echoed, not only in my presentation, but in other colleagues' presentation, will be lived up to as we further progress on the gender issue. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Madam Executive Secretary, for your inspiring comments, shedding light on challenges as well as progress, in addition to actions that need to be taken to achieve gender equality and empowerment of women. We now come to our interactive dialogue, which considers challenges, gaps, and opportunities towards achieving gender equality and the Sustainable Development Goals. I would like to welcome our panelists and also welcome Ms. Anna Karin Jadfos on behalf of the co-chairs of the Thematic Working Group on Gender Equality and Empowerment of Women and the UN Women Asia Pacific Regional Director, who will moderate the session and offer closing remarks.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And I also want to thank Dr. Akhtar, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, for her opening remarks and for reminding all of us of the importance of leadership, data, and resources to accelerate progress on women's human rights. On behalf of UN Women, I am delighted and honored to be able to lead this very distinguished and inspirational panel this morning. For more than 100 years now, International Women's Day has been a day to celebrate the social, cultural, political, and economic achievements that women have made and continue to make around the world. It's a day where we honor all of those who have come before us, who have challenged harmful gender stereotypes and practices that we know constrain the lives of both women and men. And every year on International Women's Day, we pay tribute to the brave women who have risked their lives, in some cases lost their lives, and raised their voices to claim a seat at the table, to negotiate peace, to stand up against violence and discrimination, and to demand equal rights in law and in practice, at home and at work and in society. But this year, as we have seen and as we have heard, the International Women's Day comes at a unique moment in history. As you saw in the video and as you heard from the Executive Secretary, governments in Asia and the Pacific overwhelmingly answered UN Women's call to step it up for gender equality, pledging concrete and measurable actions for gender equality. And last year, governments around the world also reaffirmed their commitment to the Beijing Platform for Action, a document which can still inspire us more than 20 years after it was first adopted, with its recognition that gender equality is not just a human rights and development imperative in its own right, but indeed a precondition for any development, peace, and security. So our panel today will celebrate these unprecedented achievements, but also provide a chance to reflect on what else is needed to ensure that these commitments are implemented to achieve a planet 50-50 by 2030. But before introducing the panel, I would like to also recognize the audience that we have with us today, members from the Diplomatic Corps, the Royal Thai Army and the Royal Thai Police and the Cadet Academy, students, CSOs, women's organizations, members of the UN family, and of course, the audience that is following this on live stream on the internet. So without further ado, let me turn to our panel. On my immediate left, we have His Excellency Dr. Siri Nontasut, who is the Thailand representative to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. He is an international law expert who, amongst his many achievements, was a member of the drafting group that drafted the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. And next to him, we have Dr. Tinsuri Siribodhi, who is the Deputy Director at the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, or CMEO, where she's currently serving as the Deputy Director. Her areas of expertise include regional cooperation, education for sustainable development, and the use of technology for teaching and learning. She has been involved in the development of several regional education programs within ASEAN. We then have Ms. Chloe Reynaldo, who is a youth activist of YPR in the Philippines. She's been engaged in humanitarian work, including after the Haiyan typhoon, where she has been defending young people's sexual and reproductive health and rights. Then we have Ms. Sokan who's a land rights activist from Cambodia, and she's been promoting women's issues, housing rights, and land titling for the past decade. And last but not least, we have Ms. Sawalak Tongwei, who's the coordinator of Abilis Foundation, Mekong Regional Office. She was the Regional Development Officer of the Disabled Peoples International, Asia Pacific, and she has also been selected as Outstanding Woman for promoting women's human rights here in Thailand. And she's also one of the founding members of the ASEAN Disability Forum, and she's been very involved in developing networks for women with disabilities at the regional level. So each of these panelists will be sharing their views and experiences on different aspects of our common goal for reaching a planet 50-50. So I will turn now to our first panelist, Dr. Siri. Now, as we have heard, the Agenda 2030 represents a watershed global agreement to achieve sustainable development. Can you tell us from an international legal perspective, what does its framework bring in relation to strengthening accountability for women's rights?
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me here today to congratulate women around the world. I must say that I'm probably the happiest minority here on this panel, and very delightedly so. Now, to your question, I'd like to answer by pointing out two things. One is the issue of interconnectedness of the many issues of women. First of all, there are many statuses and roles that a woman can play. She can be a girl child, a stateless children, a mother, an entrepreneur, aspiring politician, an informed voter, or victims of human rights violations. I think it is important to highlight the fact that we must address the issue of women empowerment from a holistic approach. And there are many other terms that we can use interchangeably, including intersectionality, interconnectedness, looking at the ecosystem of what contributes to women empowerment, what creates the environment where women can play their role. Now, let me turn to SDGs. We have standards, and I'll be addressing the issue of standards later on. We have standards in the Beijing platform, most importantly in CEDAW, the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, almost 30 years already. But the SDGs bring to us quantifiable goals that, and together with that, the commitment of at a high level that you see, observe from various leaders of the world. More importantly, I think the SDGs bring to us a number of measurable activities, and in my view, the most important one being data collection, to enhance, to decide on an informed basis. So the SDGs would complement existing standards by upgrading various institutions, alerting them to the fact that they need to what they need to achieve in the medium and long-term goals.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Now, you have mentioned some of the areas in which the SDGs can increase accountability, and of course we understand that the state has the primary responsibility for ensuring women's human rights. But what role do you think that regional mechanisms like Aisha in particular can play in terms of addressing women's human rights across the pillars of sustainable development?
This is the issue at my heart. I've been working on this for a number of years already. Let me talk about ASEAN first, as a regional grouping comprising 10 member states here in Southeast Asia Pacific. First of all, ASEAN itself has achieved good progress in empowering women in terms of trying to mitigate violence against women. Last year, at the 27th summit in Kuala Lumpur, the ASEAN leaders adopted the regional plan of action to eliminate violence against women, supported, of course, by the UN Women, and thank to UN Women as well. At the same summit, I have to say, the leaders also adopt another report, but much less well known. This is called the report on the gender impact of the ASEAN Economic Community. What catches my attention in that report is the Gender Inequality Index of 9 ASEAN member states in 2014, with the exception of Brunei. The study does not show, but I look up the UNDP report and find out that the country that has lowest gender inequality index in the world in 2014 is Slovenia, with a GII of 0.016, whereas the best result in ASEAN is Singapore, with the GII of 0.09. And among the lower end of the spectrum, we have countries that have GII that are higher than 0.5. No need to say that we have a long way to go before we eradicate inequality. But I hope that for ASEAN, our milestone will not be as far away as in 2033, as predicted in the study. Let me turn to what would bring to ASEAN. We have adopted a new vision, ASEAN Vision 2025. Still, we have three pillars, ASEAN Political Security Community, ASEAN Economic Community, and ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. This pillarized structure is still intact. What we have seen as a progress in the AEC is the notion of sustainable development. So it is a challenge to ASEAN to what extent can we incorporate the SDGs and using the reference to sustainable development within the AEC to address the many issues, including Goal 5 pertaining to women in particular. Now comes to my own personal point, the ICHA. I think we have two roles to play. One is we can complement existing standards that are at the international level, CEDAW and CRC and many others, international instruments. Secondly, we can create a better standard for this particular region, and I must say better, by bringing value added to the existing one. We are trying, and I have to say that there are countries in ASEAN that are quite advanced in terms of women empowerment. I can say, to the credit of the Philippines, that has a lot of things to do, and also in Thailand as well. Now, last point that I like to say is that it's not just states who have the role to play. Of course, states bear primary responsibility. I see two other stakeholders. One is ASEAN itself, because ASEAN recognizes human rights as one of the foundational principles of ASEAN. So ASEAN, I would argue, is the duty bearer when it comes to human rights protection. And lastly, I think private sector or corporations also have the role to play when we talk about CSRs, and I'm more than happy to talk more about that. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for reminding us of the fact that we have other duty bearers, including regional institutions and the private sector. I will turn now to Dr. Tinseri. Now, we know that education is an enabler for sustainable development in many forms. And thanks to MDGs, we have seen some really impressive results, particularly in the area of primary education. But of course, we know that many gaps remain, particularly at the secondary and the tertiary levels. And perhaps even more so, we have seen remaining concerns in relation to the quality of education and also retention rates. So can you tell us what are some of the steps that have been taken at the regional level to reach gender equality in education?
Thank you very much. Perhaps I'd like to share the experience of CMIO by telling you a story of people in Southeast Asia, of how they come together and try to achieve difficult goals. And this story started out in about 7 years ago. 7 years ago, it was in 2008. The ministers of education in Southeast Asian countries, meaning ASEAN plus Timor-Leste, were get together and think of how we will achieve EFA goal by 2015. That was 8 years ago, before 2015. So they used the mechanism of CMIO, which is an intergovernment or regional organization. That's what we are, to try to help each other, the one who are left behind on retention or drops out, helping those to reach the goal that we try to set together. So let's go together hand in hand. I'm just not running ahead of you and leaving you behind. That's not Southeast Asian culture or context. So let's go together. So they get together and work. So based on that idea, we come up with a project called Reaching the Unreached. And the Reaching the Unreached projects, we have about 10 projects, and the member countries of CMIO, which we have 11, identify what are they good at. So they will be the lead countries of that particular project in terms of reaching the unreached. The unreached in this context mean the minority groups, disadvantaged, or also including the girls and women. So we have one project based off that initiative called a conference on empowering or encouraging education for girls and women, particularly the one in the rural areas. And Malaysia was the one who lead this project. That was 7 or 8 years ago. So this is a story of how we get together, and based on that activity that we embarked on 8 years ago, we were able to identify, because we come together sharing experience and practices, we were able to identify 3 key areas. Maybe today it's not new for you anymore because this is 8 years, but at that time when we were able to identify these key issues, it was very interesting and we worked together to achieve it. So the 3 areas was, one is about access to education, of why there are problems in gender in education because of access. If you don't give equal access or access for education in the rural area, how can they receive education despite girls or boys? So the first issue was access. The second access was, how do we prevent the dropout of girls from school because of pregnancy? A lot of issue in terms of pregnancy comes across, so we try together solve, and I'll mention briefly to you how do we tackle all those issues. The third issue is about how do we attract students to come to schools. The first one that about access, of course, many countries have now embarked on, and it's, as a result, you can see that there's an increased rate on enrollment, is that we increase the number of policy, look beyond all of this integration. It boils down to socio-economic and cultural perception. Culture, you name it. Religion, you name it. Attitude. Lack of awareness, which sometimes it's difficult to change. Because how can you change a people's perception of the way they have been practiced for years? For example, in religion, some religion tends to put more emphasis to boys in education more than girls. How do you change the attitude or help the poverty within the parents? Bringing girls to school instead of keeping them to help the household or taking them to the farm. So a lot of things has to do with that. However, I think there's a way that we try to raise awareness and help, because all of these things, it's not just girl or boys at the end. Look beyond that. Talk about people at the Ministry of Education. Talk about political person, talk about not only teacher or personnel. It's all have to be intertwined and work as one. I think there's a good movement on that. You can need to continue to raise awareness in many ways, education, and there's a good numbers that show the increase, and empower women. Last week I was in Vietnam. The interesting fact is that Vietnam, before that, the women leader used to be 23%, and the government of Vietnam said that now, after the election in June, we will increase the number of women in the politics after the election to be 53%. So that is something remarkable that government make a commitment. Or giving a case of Indonesia. Indonesia and Malaysia has a policy where it's an administrative policy, but not legislative yet, is that 30% of the high level of management at the ministry or at the government should be women. So some has been embarked on little by little pockets of policy and initiative here and there. Curriculum, the content as well that we need to look in. But above all, I think it's us, raising awareness, or even us here. How have you take action on this? Or you just think that it's okay because it's been like this, there's no issue on gender at all. That tends to be the conclusion. So the question is at you, and you can make the difference, starting the step today.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Tinsri. Now, you've been talking about education, so I want to turn now to our youngest panelist. Now, Chloe, you are just 15 years old, and you are an honor student in the Philippines, where you have been using your incredible talents for public speaking to inform your peers about issues around adolescent sexual and reproductive health. Can you tell us a little bit what inspired you to do this work, and what do you think are the key messages that your generation needs to hear to ensure that we can reach the goal of Planet 50-50 by 2030?
So, as a peer educator, of course, I have to go around to many different schools, to far-off places, sometimes even in the mountains. And one of the things that inspires me is whenever I can see the effect that my words have, whenever I see the students listening to me and really absorbing the message that I'm sending to them. And one of the most inspiring things about what I do is getting to see these students open up to me and to tell me their experiences of how they experience being marginalized or being not prioritized simply because of their gender or because of their age. So I would like to share a story that so perfectly illustrates the troubles that young girls have to face. So we all know about the typhoon Haiyan, which hit the Philippines, but in our province, we were harder hit by the typhoon Frank in 2008. So one of the girls opened up to me about her experiences at that time. She was 8 years old. Her father had died when she was younger, so she only lived with her mother. When the storm came, her house was too far away from the evacuation center for her to go there. So the two of them spent their time in the storm alone in the house. And of course, the mother did everything that she could to protect her daughter. So by the end of the storm, the mother was very sick because she had spent the whole night boarding up the windows, trying to keep it from blowing in. So the girl, knowing that her mother was in no condition to help her, she walked 2 miles to the evacuation center in order to get the relief goods, which did not come immediately, actually. So when she went to the evacuation center, she was not given priority because she was a small girl and on her own. She wasn't paid attention to, and it took a long time for her to even get in line to get those relief goods. So once she got them, she returned home the 2 miles to walk again, and then when she got home, her mother was already dead. So it like really illustrates the kind of troubles that they have to face simply because they're girls and seen as helpless. So a lot of questions are raised there. Why wasn't anyone there to help her? Why didn't anyone ask her if she was okay or even made sure that she went home safely? So it's like, it's not just gender inequality, but it's also abuse of a basic human right as a child to be helped by adults. So one of the messages that I would like to send to the youth is to know your rights and to make sure that these mistakes do not become ours. So I don't want to speak just to the youth, but also to the teachers now and to the parents, because my generation now, by the time we reach the year 2030, we will become the adults. We will become the working force of our society. So I want to make sure that we are able to grow up without any biases, without any prejudices, and we need you adults now to help us for that. So that when we grow up, when we become the adults, we are able to start a cycle of equality with our own children, our grandchildren, so that this inequality can be eradicated and everyone is perceived as equal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chloe, for that very passionate call for action, for reminding us that, of course, as young people, you really are the future leaders, and that adults not only have a legal and moral obligation, but also a very practical interest in make sure that we are supporting you and realizing your rights. Now, in particular, I want to ask you about the issue of sexual and reproductive health and rights. Why do you think these issues are so important for young people? And what do you think we as the UN, as governments, as civil society can do to ensure that young people have access to the information that they need to make healthy decisions?
That's actually one of the most common questions that the students themselves ask me, because sometimes when I'm discussing sexual reproductive health rights, they're asking me why I'm 15 years old, why am I discussing them, why am I discussing these kinds of topics? And sometimes even the teachers at the schools that I go to ask, aren't I just giving them like the wrong ideas? Aren't I enabling these kinds of thoughts in them? But then my reply is always that the youth need to know because the adults can't always be there to guide our decisions. You can tell them all that they want, that they should do this, but if they don't understand why they have to do this, then just telling them won't work. They won't understand really the implications and the consequences of their actions unless they know exactly how it affects them and how it affects others. So I think that's a really important reason why these youth need to be educated in topics like this, not just in sexual reproductive health rights, but also gender equality, so that when they grow up, they're able to become enlightened individuals and be able to make smart decisions. So I think to support these kinds of endeavors, the government really needs to invest in education, because every girl, once she is educated, she will be able to grow up to become a learned individual, a working pillar in our society and our workforce. And education really is important to help them empower, because if they are not educated, they will not know that they have rights that they need to pursue and that they need to obtain. So education will help them to fulfill their potential, not just as a woman or as a girl, but as a person working for the society of his or her country.
Thank you very much, Chloe, for reminding us of the power of youth in being the future that we all want. I will now turn to Ms. Sokan now we know that around the world women often lack land and property rights, often because of harmful norms as well as discriminatory legislations. And in fact, even in countries where women are the majority of small farmers, they are routinely denied the right to own the land that they cultivate and that they depend on to support their families. And at the same time, we know that land and property play such an important role to provide income and security. And without these rights, women are often denied a say in decision-making within the household, in terms of their opportunities to develop their businesses, or of course to have recourse when and if crises strike. So I would like to ask you, Ms. Can you tell us about your experience in promoting equal rights to property, and why do you think this is such an important issue for gender equality?
ខ្ញុំមកពីប្រទេសកម្ពុជាខ្ញុំសូមជម្រាបអស់លោកថានៅប្រទេសកម្ពុជានេះគឺដោយអស់លោកជ្រាបស្រាប់ហើយមានការរកាំរកូសបញ្ហារឿងដីធ្លីពីរដ្ឋាភិបាលនិងពីអ្នកដែលមានអំណាចចាកន្លងមកគឺនៅខ្ញុំលើកឡើងមួយតំបន់គឺ
there will be consecutive translation. Excuse me. You will not find the Khmer English in your headsets, but you will be hearing afterwards. Thank you. Please continue, Ms.
អរលោកជ្រាបស្រាប់ហើយថាខ្ញុំលើកពីតំបន់បង្កក់ដែលបណ្ដាប្រទេសនានាក៏បានជ្រាបថានៅតំបន់បង្កក់នេះគឺជាប្រឈមជាមួយនឹងរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលប្រឈមជាមួយនឹងសមត្ថកិច្ចគ្រប់ជាន់ថ្នាក់ទាំងអស់យើងដឹងហើយថាសិទ្ធិស្ត្រីគឺមានគ្រប់ប្រទេសទាំងអស់តែដោយឡែកនៅប្រទេសកម្ពុជាសិទ្ធិស្ត្រីគឺមិនទាន់មានពិតប្រាកដទេនៅពេលដែលពួកខ្ញុំចេញទៅតវ៉ារឿងដីធ្លីនៅតំបន់បង្កក់នេះតែងតែប្រឈមជាមួយនឹងសមត្ថកិច្ចមានការវាយមានការឆក់ជួនកាលធ្វើឲ្យរលូតកូនធ្វើឲ្យបាក់ដៃរហូតដល់មានស្ត្រីខ្លះសុខចិត្តពលីជីវិតដើម្បីដីធ្លីនេះ
Okay, good morning, Excellency and everyone. My name is Suchan. I'm from Cambodia, and I would like to share with you, some of the experience on the land grabbing and the land eviction. Specifically, the case is happening in the central of the Phnom Penh's capital is Bangkok Lake, who's the name of as the result of affected development of private company. And the government, granted this piece of land to the private company for development. But as a result, the thousands of people, at the end of the day, really, distracted and affected by the plan, which is very, very bad in the country. And I would say that there are a lot of consequences affect to the people there, especially to women and then the girls, and there are serious cases of people dead as a result of demonstration against the authority. ដោយសារមានអំពើហិង្សាច្រើនជាច្រើនតទៅទៀតហើយយើងខ្ញុំដែលជាស្ត្រីនៅតំបន់បង្កក់ក្តីស្ត្រីនៅសហគមន៍នានាក្តីបដិញ្ញាតស៊ូ
ទាមទារនៅសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពរបស់ស្ត្រីដែលជាសិទ្ធិក្នុងការថែរក្សាអចលនទ្រព្យដូចជាដីធ្លីនេះជាដើមចាយើងខ្ញុំនឹងតស៊ូព្យាយាមប្រឆាំងរាល់ទង្វើដែលរដ្ឋាភិបាលឬក៏សមត្ថកិច្ចធ្វើមកលើពួកយើងខ្ញុំគឺថារហូតដល់ទីបញ្ចប់នៅបច្ចុប្បន្ននេះពួកខ្ញុំតស៊ូ7ឆ្នាំនេះគឺបានលទ្ធផលចុងក្រោយគឺបានរដ្ឋាភិបាលបានចុះដីឲ្យប្រជាជននៅតំបន់បឹងកក់នេះ12ហិកតាចុច44 A សម្រាប់ឲ្យប្រជាជនបឹងកក់រស់នៅចាក្នុងនោះមាន700 គ្រួសារជាងសម្រាប់រស់នៅលើដី12ហិកតាចុច44 A នេះក៏ដោយសារការទាមទារព្យាយាមរបស់ពួកយើងខ្ញុំដែលជាស្ត្រីចេញទៅតវ៉ាចា
Thank you.
Okay. You know, when this case is already happened 7 years, still up to now, and it's still not yet completely successfully. I would like to say that, you know, because the power people from the business sector and, you know, some of the involvement of the government official, that make this situation very worse. And then from my action, from my movement, because I receive different, you know, training and capacity building from civil society and involvement support of local NGO working on the land project, working together to advocate, to approach the government through soft and hard approach. But through the soft approach, it doesn't work. I mean, submit the, you know, statement, you know, meeting with the authority, you know, submission of the need for the women to the office of the Prime Minister, to the ministry, and then it doesn't work, and it's delayed until 5 years. And then we decided to take a hard approach, which means that we need to demonstrate again the authority to demand for this, because this is the rights that we ensure by the government, and it's as a state in the CEDAW Convention that we need the government to really implement this properly. And at the end, we got the success case of receiving the guarantee from the government, you know, guarantee to the community to issue the land, to decide for keep people, they are not moving outside of the area, and issues the land to people, but it takes 7 years.
Thank you very much for sharing your experiences, and thank you for your activism to ensure that women have equal land and property rights. Thank you, Ms. Om. Now I will turn to our last panelist, Ms. Hawalat. Now, for far too long, women and girls living with disability have been quite invisible, sometimes amongst groups working for women's rights, as well as within groups working for the rights of people living with disability. And we know that women and girls with disability are more likely to experience double or even triple discrimination for those coming from developing countries, both as female, as people living with disability, and of course as overrepresented amongst the poor. And many will find it difficult to file a grievance due to lack of confidence or lack of legal knowledge. But you yet have found the strength to advocate for change and to support people living with disabilities to end the discrimination that they face. Now, I would like to ask you, we know that in the SDGs we have references to disability within many different sections: education, growth, human settlements, etc. But do you think it goes far enough? And perhaps, even more importantly, how can we make sure that these commitments in the SDGs are effectively implemented?
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizer and the participant here to pay attention to women with disability issues. To answer your question, actually it is not easy because the question is really abstract. So I would want to begin with the storytellings. Actually, I have many stories. collecting from women with disability around across Asia Pacific. The first story will from Central Asia. Yeah, the ladies, supports I am Miss Beauties. I was the only female person with disability and was attempt at my workplace. I work hard to support my students and also try hard to bend in with the people at work. But on the way back from a company trip, my boss asked me to go out for a drink. I got drunk with him and fell asleep, and then he took me to a hotel and left me. Afterward, he repeated, forced me to have a sex with him. I reported this to a company counseling office, but what the counselor said just hurt my feelings a lot more. They just made up a biased story in favor of the offenders and conclude that it was not a rape. I brought a lawsuit against the offenders and my employers. I lost the case in the first time. The support group was formed to help me. And then the Court of Appeals ordered the accused to admit his guilt on sexual assault and pay compensations. But however, the same court orders were not made in following tales, and the employers were not called to account, and why I was filing an appeal to the Supreme Court, but I got laid off. The main reason for my laid off because I missed too many working days. But the offenders and the employers were who caused me to take such a long time off from the work still be fine. Okay, the first story. And the second story, from the rural area of Thailand. She is a hearing impaired. She worked at the massage shops. She said, my salary was below a minimum wage guarantee. So I had to work overtime to earn more. And one day, male client violated and asked me to have sex. And I denied and reported the case to my boss, who is the shop owner. But the shop owner requested me to accept and followed the request. On the last day of my work, he came to the shop again and forced me to have sex and tried to leave me. I begged him to release me, but he insists that he wants to have sex with me. And I begged him several times, again and again, and he did not stop to approach me. I was very, very, serious and terrified, and suddenly I stabbed him with a pocket knife. He died. I was a jail sentence for 3 years terms because there was no legal aid to support me, no sign language interpreters, and my boss, the shop owner, did not stand by my side. I was 3 years in jail. Now I am here. I am here, he said, when we met each other at the women conference in the north of Thailand. My name is right now listed on criminal court record. And what is about my futures? And she wants to ask me, she wants me to convey the issue, her story, and ask what issue does her life story portray. And the last one, female migrant worker, she is Kachin, and she could not find a decent job because low education levels, and she paid money to a job placement agency and get unskilled jobs with a work permit. But unfortunately, luck did not stay with her. Construction stand fell down, and then she got spinal cord injury, and then she was in hospitalized for 3 months and had to spend the other 3 months for rehabilitation. But the employer paid only 3 months and no home to stay for the other 3 months. And she tried to ask for help, even contact to the government shelter for women, but the government shelter and private shelter for women don't accept her because they don't know how to deal with.
Thank you very much for sharing some of these very powerful stories about not only the types of violence and abuses that women with disabilities face, but also their particular challenges in accessing justice and support services.
But
so now,
yeah,
we have to move on to the next round.
Yeah, but I want to highlight the first one. The reflection is about the data collection I have found in the data collections in some countries. There is no segregated data. I can find low education rate, levels of women with disability in rural area, but I could not find violent, the data, the record on violent cases. So the recommendation or affirmative action is to improve disability sensitivity data collection in regular household surveys.
Thank you very much, and I think that's a very important piece and very strongly linked to the SDGs and the importance of having data that can highlight some of these particular manifestations of discrimination and ensure an effective response. We have come to the end of our panel, but before we break, I would like to give just a few reflections from the floor. If I may begin, I know we have a few requests from the floor. Now, we have a representative from the private sector with us, Ms. Zhang Yefeng, who is the Vice General Manager of Proya Cosmetics, the first company in China to sign on to the Women's Empowerment Principles. Now, Ms. Yefeng, Proya has been very active in supporting a number of gender equality projects, not just as part of your own corporate social responsibility, but also by supporting the China Gender Fund, where you have been supporting innovative projects around the country to promote women's rights. Can you tell us very briefly, just 1 or 2 minutes, what do you think the private sector can do in promoting women's rights?
Okay, thank you. Our company is a Chinese cosmetics company, so most of our customers are women. Our company's purpose is not only supporting women's needs, but also to change their minds, especially on gender equality. We promised to donate 10 million RMB to UN Women within 5 years on different projects in China. So we insisted to influence our customers, employees, partner companies, and the local government to promote gender equality, such as to make them more confident and to empower them. In our company, we encourage women's leadership. Myself is a good example. As a result of supporting gender equality, apart from increasing our sales, our brand become more and more reliable, responsible, and popular. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution and for your support. Now, I would like to call now on Ms. Jean Chong, who is the co-founder of a lesbian activist group, Sayoni, in Singapore. Can you maybe reflect very briefly what you draw from this in particular in relation to a SOGI perspective? I know that you have been part of the ASEAN SOGI caucus. So please, we would like to hear your perspectives.
Okay, thank you. I guess the central message of the SDG is to leave no one behind. But if the global commitment to eradicate inequality for all people is truly unequivocal, as leaders claim it to be, the implementation of these SDG goals need to take into account the voices of women who, because of their sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, have historically been excluded from the benefits of development policies and programs. Goal 5 of the SDG is to achieve equality and to empower all women and girls. But lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and intersex women experience multiple intersecting forms of discrimination and violence because of their sexual orientation and gender. So this discrimination and violence occurs in the private and public sphere of home, at work, in schools, by public institutions, and many times by the state and policy makers. And more needs to be done to tackle harmful stereotypes that limit all people from being themselves and pursuing their goals. Gender-based violence is often driven by a desire to punish people who don't conform to gender norms. And as a result, LGBTI women, male and non-binary people who move away from these norms are also targeted. So solving these problems probably require a deliberate approach, working with the whole community to address gender stereotypes, but also focusing on support for LGBT women as they are severely affected by gender-based discrimination and violence. There's also a need for South-South movement building by strengthening CSO-led processes and not just widening political spaces. Having a strong CSO-led movement will continue to hold government accountable, and that's vital. UN Women and stakeholders must support spaces where CSO, in particular LGBTI organizations, that can discuss deliberate issues and work towards being part of the agenda of governments. And it is only in this way that we can truly say that we left no women behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chung, not only for sharing your reflections of the situation faced by the LGBT community, but also reminding us of the crucial importance of civil society in holding governments accountable. Thank you, Ms. Chung. Now, last but not least, I want to turn to our colleague from UNFPA, Ms. Ingrid Fitzgerald. Do you want to share very briefly in 1 or 2 minutes your reflections on what you've heard today? Ingrid.
Thank you, AK, and thank you to the great panelists. It's been more than 20 years, as you know, since the Beijing Platform for Action set out a very integrated and comprehensive approach to achieving gender equality and women's empowerment. And now, as we begin to implement the SDGs, we really have a development agenda that goes well beyond the MDGs and puts gender equality at the heart of sustainable development. Critically, this includes violence against women, which was missing from the MDGs, and it also includes sexual and reproductive health and rights and ending harmful practices, and it's so critical. Because if we're going to realise the aspirations of the SDGs, then women's bodily autonomy and integrity has to be at the heart of all of our endeavours. And this means the right to live a life free of violence, to safety at home, at work and on the streets, to decide the number and spacing of our children and to make choices that are free from coercion and violence, to decide who and how to love. These rights have never been more important and never been more fundamental. And these are the rights that we have to realise if we're going to achieve the SDGs for women and girls. We have a lot to do. We know that 1 woman in 3 globally experiences violence, that 117 million are missing across Asia alone as the result of son preference and sex-selective abortion. 13.5 million girls are married off each year. So if we're going to end violence and eliminate harmful practices, we really have to ensure a comprehensive and integrated approach. Most women still don't receive the support they need. On average, only 4 in 10 seek help and only 6% from the authorities. And the gap between prevalence, reporting, help seeking and justice and reparations remains far too wide. So we all have to work together, all sectors, health, justice and policing and social services, to really respond and prevent violence. And governments really have to do more to implement the commitments they've made and allocate resources. And be accountable to the women who experience and survive violence. In all that we do and in each and every sector, we have to ensure that we're working to realise women's right to freedom from violence and bodily integrity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. And of course, the strong commitments to end violence against women is indeed one of the primary achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have unfortunately come to the end of this very interesting and dynamic conversation. I will not try or attempt to summarize what has been said, but simply to say that we have now really been reminded of the importance of strengthening accountability at all levels, and I like what Dr. Siri said, to create a conducive ecosystem for the achievement of gender equality. We know that we must address issues of women's access to education, land, and other economic and productive assets. And from a number of our speakers, we have been reminded of the intersectionality and the importance of including and listening to the voices of those who are the most marginalized, including women and girls living with disabilities, and of course, the LGBTI community. And we need to broaden our engagement with the private sector to be positive change agents. And of course, we also need to address the harmful norms and stereotypes that perpetuate violence against women, as well as discrimination, and that can limit women's ability to control their sexual and reproductive lives. So finally, I wish to quote UN Women Executive Director, Dr. Pumse Limbla Bunguka, on this International Women's Day. Each one of us is needed in our countries, communities, organizations, governments, and in the United Nations to ensure decisive, visible, and measurable actions are taken under the banner Planet 50/50, Step It Up for Gender Equality. I want to thank our distinguished panelists, to the audience in the room, and those of you watching online, and we wish you a happy International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna Karen. Thank you again to the panelists. We also wish to thank our interpreters, both up there and sign language. And we wish to welcome you outside for some light refreshments. ขอบคุณทุกท่านที่มาร่วมงานในวันนี้
Thank you everyone who's
ชวน
here
ข้าง
today.
นอ
I
ก
would like
รับ
to
ประทานอา
invite
หาร
you
ว่าง
to take
ข้าง
a
หน้าห้อง
little
ประชุม
break
ครับ
in front of the room. Thank you.